Всем привет! Меня зовут Евгений Бычков, я музыкант и типа как журналист и музыкальный критик, и я очень люблю группу «Аквариум» и вообще все, что делает Борис Гребенщиков. Какое-то время назад «Аквариум» выступал в Торонто, и я записал тогда небольшое интервью с Борисом для своей тогдашней радиопрограммы «Две жизни спустя», она вообще-то о классик-роке. И тогда же познакомился и, надеюсь, даже подружился с их барабанщиком, ирландцем по происхождению Лиамом Брэдли. Он интереснейший человек, и я давно хотел сделать с ним подробное интервью. И вот теперь, когда и Канада, и Ирландия из-за ковида оказались в глубоком локдауне, я эту свою давнишнюю мечту осуществил. Жена моя, конечно, не захотела пропускать такую потеху и легонько подпинывала меня под столом, когда мой английский уходил куда-то никуда. Ну, я, конечно, понимаю, что для большинства поклонников «Аквариума» английский вообще не помеха, но, однако же, мы добавили русские субтитры, ну, чтобы уж все могли получить такое же удовольствие. Так что этот ролик– знак нашей горячей любви и к «Аквариуму», и персонально к Лиаму, и, конечно, к БГ Боря. Спасибо вам за свет. Ну, а всем остальным enjoyте.
Okay.
Okay, so hi guys. This is Liam Bradley, our old-time friend who we had met for a long time, I think a couple of years, right? Mariana,
Certainly
my wife.
certainly a couple of years. Niagara Falls, I think.
Niagara
was the last.
Falls and then Toronto, if you remember.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I remember the snow.
Oh, yeah.
I remember the snow. I remember the snow. Yeah.
Yeah, and cold. Do you miss it, by the way?
I do. In fact, I just texted Boris a while ago. He's in Ukraine at the moment, and I said that I missed the crisp winters of the East.
Uh-huh.
Because winters in Ireland are wet and cold,
Oh,
which
yeah,
it can very often feel colder because it's wet. But you can be minus 20 in Toronto or minus 20 in Moscow, and it's crisp. You know, it's crisp, so it doesn't stick to your face the way it does here.
Yeah, that's true. You're in Ireland right now, right?
Yes, I'm in Ireland. Yeah,
Geographically, Derry.
Derry, northwest, up in the northwest corner. So if this is Ireland and this is Dublin and Belfast is here, I'm here. Here.
Is it cold over there?
It's not so bad. It was cold last week. It's I don't know, maybe 7-8 degrees here at the moment. So, and it's blue skies outside, so it's fine.
How do you feel in these terrible times? You're not traveling. You're just sitting home or what?
Okay. There are two sides to this. Obviously, it's terrible times for almost everyone. Everyone's locked down. For me, because I have my own little recording studio here.
Yeah.
I've actually had the most creative year recording that I've ever had. I really have.
What exactly do you record?
Well, right. So I'm obviously a drummer and a percussionist. I've had this little setup here for many, many years, and people will send me stuff to play on over the internet. I record it, I send it back. Now, this was only whilst I was on the road with Boris and with Van and with all these other people, I would only do this every few months.
Mm-hmm.
But since March of last year, I started getting calls from producers saying, okay, all the recording studios are closed. We believe you have a very good professional setup to just record drums and percussion. And I do. So I've ended up playing on 4, 5, 6 albums, and then any number of individual tracks and singles for people, some TV shows and stuff like that. So obviously I've just finished Brian Finnegan's new album, which is out next month.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Actually, I was going to ask you about it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So there's a guy called Manus Lunny, who is in a band called Capper Cayley. He's a very famous traditional Irish musician.
Mm-hmm.
I finished his album at the end of January. It'll be out later in the year. There's a singer-songwriter called Paul Brady, very famous in Ireland. I've done maybe 3-4 tracks for him. I did a whole album for Eleanor McAvoy. I did an album for a girl called Ava McMahon, who plays in Celtic Woman, the show Celtic Woman, and a guy called Paul Byram, who's a kind of a tenor type singer.
Mm-hmm.
So all those albums I've done since last March, and then in between times, 50 or 60 individual tracks, plus of course the stuff that I've done for Boris.
What kind of stuff you done for Boris and Aquarium?
Well,
Because
Boris,
yeah,
yeah,
sorry, let me interrupt you. Because as far
yes,
as I watch from here, he was very active, like extremely active last
extremely
year.
active.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. Boris just didn't stop at all. I mean, he's a phenomenon, really. I mean,
Tell me about it.
he's a phenomenon. You know, at the beginning of the lockdown, when everyone was depressed, and I rang Boris, mostly from out of concern for Boris because of his age and his
Mhm.
health issues. And I said, please be careful, and you know, don't take unnecessary risks. Please be alive when this is all over. And he said, we're privileged to live in such interesting times. Not everyone gets to witness something like this. And
Mhm.
you know, he was sending me fantastic photographs of the deserted streets of London and all sorts of stuff. Amazing. And Boris says, I don't know how many albums he's recorded. I've contributed here and there. I'm about to record something else from at the moment. I lose track actually of
Uh-huh.
what I've recorded and when which albums they end up on. He asked me to send a photograph for the recent album Thor, which has come out. He said,
Uh-huh.
send me your photograph. And I said, am I on it? Because I never know. And he said, oh, yo, you're on most of it.
Uh-huh.
Bar this track and this track and this track. And lo and behold, there I am. I'm on it. But Boris moves so quickly. You know, the moment he finishes one album, I mean, a week later, he's started on the next one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, so
So you contributed to these
yes.
few albums without actually knowing what song you're in. You just send your parts or
Well, no. I do
covers.
know. I do know. No, what I mean is, I can contribute, and I've done this many times, to something that Boris is. Boris will send me a track,
Uh-huh.
and I'll contribute something to it.
Uh-huh.
There's no guarantee that my part will end up on the finished mix.
Right.
You know, he might decide, oh, let's try something else, and he'll use Jeremy Stacey, and Jeremy Stacey will come in and record something. Or at one point, you know, I think he
I'm
had.
sorry. I'm sorry, Liam. Who's Jeremy Stacey?
Oh, Jeremy Stacey is a very, very famous drummer
Oh,
from
okay.
London. From London, so Jeremy has played with the High Flying Birds, Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds, Sheryl Crow,
Uh-huh.
and at the
Uh-huh. I
moment,
got it. Got it.
at the moment, he's one of the three drummers who's playing with King Crimson.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So, so like any singer songwriter, Boris, his dream is to be involved with as many people as possible. Obviously, in the live band, I'm in Aquarium in the live band situation.
Yeah.
But when it comes to making an album, Boris is the songwriter. And, you know, so for instance, in fact, when I saw you last in Toronto, I think we went to the States then.
Yep.
And Boris said to me, I'm going to stay on for a few weeks and record with some American musicians. Can you recommend any drummers? And I
Uh-huh.
said, absolutely, Steve Gadd. You
Uh-huh.
should use Steve Gadd, who's like, you know, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, Chucky's
Yeah.
in
Oh,
Love,
of course. Yeah.
the most famous session drummer in the world. I said, if it was me, I'd book Steve Gadd if I could afford to. So he booked Steve Gadd.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He's a legend.
And
Steve Gadd
yeah,
is a legend.
so Steve Gadd played on a version of Fake Whiskey, and I think he played on a version of Fire.
Uh-huh.
And again, I'd played on versions of those songs. So that's what I mean by I never know if my version
I see.
will end up
Uh-huh.
on the record.
Uh-huh.
It might be it might be Steve Gadd, it could be Jeremy Stacey, it could be any number of, or it could be Sly and Robbie,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
you know?
Well, that's
So
another story. Jamaican music, it's completely different story. Are you also participate in that project?
no, I think Sly and Robbie did a lot of the reggae stuff. I've certainly played on reggae tunes for Boris, going back as far as Arkhangelsk.
Uh-huh.
There were quite a few reggae flavored, like Fire Over Babylon, and I mean that's
Uh-huh.
very much a reggae track. That's me on that. But you know, Boris, I think what it is, Boris, because these people have a mythical status for Boris. I mean, don't forget, and you would know this also, growing up in the Soviet Union and hearing about, you know, these famous records, Bob Marley. At
Yep.
some point, if you can afford it and you can go and seek these people out. If I was a songwriter, I would want to have Sly and Robbie on one of my songs. I would want to have Steve Gadd on one of my songs. So it's, I think as any musician and as a great musician, as Boris is, you want to contribute with the best musicians in the world.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I'm not saying I'm one of those. Occasionally I get to do something if he likes it. But I think what he also wants to do is introduce these great musicians to the Russian people, to Russian speaking peoples, and go, okay, this is my song and it's in Russian, but I've got Sly and Robbie. I have Steve Gadd. I have Jeremy Stacey. I have whoever. So I think Boris is bringing this great kaleidoscope of musical color, world music. And obviously he uses Indian musicians and, Brian Finnegan, traditional Irish musician. So that's what's wonderful about Boris is that every album he makes is kind of a world music album, because he will draw on musicians from all over the world and make it as international as he possibly can.
But how does it work vice versa? I mean, okay, let me start from very, very beginning of your history with Aquarium. You joined Aquarium during the Archangelsk, right, album? And that was almost like 10 years ago.
2011, yeah, this will be my 10th year.
Exactly.
In April of this year will be 10. My association is 10 years long with Boris.
And
amazing.
Since then, that was your main work as professional is with Aquarium, right?
No. Initially, when I was with Boris, when I started with Boris, at the end of 2011, Boris asked me to come out in September, October. I did a few gigs, and I didn't really understand the process of Aquarium.
Oh, I see.
I thought, okay, so he's booked me for this 2 weeks and this 2 weeks and this month. And then when it came to December, I thought, well, that's the end of that. And Max, his manager, said, okay, so in January we have blah, blah, blah. And I went, in January, I'm in Australia. What? And I'm like, yeah, I'm a freelance musician. So, I think they thought they'd invited me to join the band, but I'd only been booked for 2 weeks or a month or whatever. And so I went to Australia with a UK pop act called Ronan Keating. And then after that, I did a tour with Mary Black. And I think in 2016, I was working with Van Morrison. I did an album with Van. I've been working with
my next stage, but that's okay.
Right, okay.
Don't run ahead.
So what happened in the first few years, Aquarium maybe made up half of what I was doing. But then because Boris, as I got used to Boris and I realized that this was much more than just an occasional a week or a month here and there, I realized that Boris did this all year round.
I see.
And so I then started getting replacements for me in these other acts. So I would work with them when I was free from Boris, but if I wasn't free, I would put in a replacement for these other acts. And over the last, say, 5 or 6 years, yes, Boris has become my main thing.
How come you're an English-speaking person?
Yes.
Is with Russian rock band for 10 years, and how's your Russian now? Except for these words that everybody knows.
Привет, как дела? I can swear a bit. Obviously, I won't for the purposes of this recording, but I can swear. I will fess up again, mea culpa. As an islander, as an Irishman, and in fact, the English are even worse. We have no borders. We have no borders with other countries who speak different languages. So the Irish and the English are absolutely the worst people in the world for learning other languages. Because English is a kind of an international language, and Boris speaks better English than I do.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, of course he does. His vocabulary is vast. So he speaks much better English than I do, being an Irishman. I can honestly say I have learned very little, if any, Russian at all, which is disgraceful. I'm ashamed. I'm deeply, deeply, deeply ashamed.
Okay, listen. He's saying he's speaking bad English. How about that? How does it sound for you?
That's not exactly what he said.
No,
It's
but
not
but
Thank you.
well,
You're
not much
listening.
better than me, anyways. But well, for
No,
me, for my ears, it's fantastic.
Yes, well, Boris and the boys, they've mostly taught me Russian swear words, which occasionally have gotten me into trouble. So I'm a kind of a performing monkey when it comes to Russian. You know, they press a button, I swear, and you know, people for shock value. But everyone in the band speaks a little English. Boris speaks perfect English. Sasha Titov, perfect English, obviously, and Gleb Grebenchikov was speaking English before he was speaking Russian.
Oh yeah, that's how it works.
You know, so yeah, and because it's kind of 2 weeks there and 2 weeks back and 2 weeks there and two, I've never gotten around to it, which is not even approaching a good enough excuse. So I can only apologize to the great peoples of the East for not delving deeply into their language and their wonderful culture.
I was worried.
I'm just going to move my face. My face was covering yours on the screen. I'm just trying to move it.
No, you're looking fine. You're looking great.
Mm-hmm.
See, Boris' music is actually full of real poetry.
Oh, for sure.
And
absolutely.
The poetry is in Russian.
Yes.
And
Boris, yeah,
how does it work with you?
Okay, I can see where you're going.
Yeah.
Obviously, Boris has written maybe 600 songs, maybe more.
Yeah.
So over the years, as I've expressed an interest in a particular song, he will send me the translation. So I have translations for maybe 50 or 60 of the songs. And I'll usually have translations for most of the tunes that are kind of common to the set that we might be performing. But if I really express what is this about? Like Boy Baba, for instance, which was great fun. So he did a translation for this. Father of Apples, he did a translation for that, and so I have maybe 50 or 60 translations. But even Boris says that it's almost impossible to translate poetry.
Sure.
It's almost impossible.
I could say this. I could tell about the same about like Bob Dylan or like great poetry in English, because, well, Shakespeare, for heaven's sake, Shakespeare has different translations. And well, that's the problem with poetry. I seriously doubt if Western people understands Pushkin's poetry as well as we are, to say true.
Of course.
Well, it's always kind of subconscious that works with the poetry combining with music, because I know that you're also singing, right?
Yes.
Are you singing with Aquaриум?
Phonetically, yes, I sing phonetics.
Yeah,
phonetics. He'll give me the translation, and then he'll sing it into a little tape for me, or on my phone, and then I'll try and learn it phonetically. So, which is great fun. I love singing in Russian. I really do. It's fantastic.
Really?
Because for the first 4 or 5 years, I've always been a singer in every situation that I've been in. And Aquarium was the notable exception, until Boris started to try this line, and it goes like this, and I'll learn it. So yeah, so now I'm singing. Fantastic. It's great.
I remember you described yourself not as drummer, not as percussionist, but as a stylist. That was your words. Could you explain?
Yeah, well, no, I'll be more specific. In terms of what I do, what I really meant by that was, most drummers would describe themselves as, I'm a jazz drummer, I'm a rock drummer, I'm a pop drummer, I'm a folk drummer. I'm all of those, and I'm none of those. Stylistically, I'm interested in all of that music, but I'm not a specialist. So if you're a specialist jazz drummer, that's, you just play jazz and you have an in-depth knowledge of that. I love all of that music. I mean, so anything that has a rhythm, anything that has a melody, anything that moves me, I'm interested in. And it could be the most banal pop song will suddenly hook into my ear and go, wow, that's great. And it could be, you know, wop bop a loop bop, you know, tutti frutti on Rudy. Doesn't mean anything. It's just a great groove.
Mm-hmm.
And the same applies to jazz. I'm not a jazz drummer. I'm not a jazz aficionado, but I love jazz. You know, so as a result, I can turn my hand to all of these styles. They're all entirely different styles. And so I think I can play all of these different styles. Reggae, I mean, I'm not a Jamaican, but I can play reggae because I love reggae and I love listening to it. So, and I know how it works. I've dissected it. And so I can play an authentic reggae rhythm. Doesn't make me a reggae drummer. So I would describe myself as a stylist, and in that I can turn my hand to all these different styles, if you know what I mean. So that's what I really meant by I'm a stylist. I'm a stylist and I'm an accompanist. You know, there are many musicians out there who are soloists. There are some great drum soloists. I'm an accompanist. I want to accompany a singer. I want to accompany a soloist. So I'm an ensemble player. I'm only really content when I'm with other people. And so I love playing with other people. I play a little bit of guitar, but I'm a terrible guitar player. I'm a good drummer. So I can't join in on guitar, but I can join in on drums and percussion.
I can't help but ask you, who's your favorite drummer?
Oh,
I know, but well, it's like Sophie's choice. I know, but still,
there are many. Okay, favorite. I certainly top three. Let's make it top three.
Okay.
Buddy Rich, Steve Gadd, and a local drummer who no one will ever have heard of, a man called Jim Whiteside, who's just a local guy here, who was an inspiration to me when I was starting off and was very kind to me when I started off. He's still alive. I still talk to him. So those three people, Steve Gadd, Buddy Rich, and Jim Whiteside.
I believe we're approximately the same age. So in other words,
really, are you approaching a big year?
I already passed it.
You passed it. Okay. Yes, for me it's March 22nd. Yeah.
Okay, for me it's history already.
Okay. Congratulations. It was a great.
Thank you.
It was a monument. 1961 was a monumental year for the world, when such great people were born.
Okay. I don't want to talk about this because I'm older, but
okay.
But in 70s, you were, as an Irishman.
Yes.
You're in the very middle of all, I would say, active but very aggressive life that happened in
the troubles, absolutely,
the troubles, exactly.
The troubles,
the word. And I remember you recommend us to watch this movie about the small record shop in Belfast,
yes,
I think, right?
Yes.
My Generation. It was it's called My Generation, I believe. I don't remember.
Good Vibrations.
Good Vibrations.
Good Vibrations.
Another great rock song. Huh?
And we did.
Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Me and Daniel, maybe not you. You should see that.
Oh my God!
You should see that.
Certainly, it was me.
Okay. Oh, okay. no, not myself. That was you. Well, great movie. And
fantastic movie. Yeah.
I remember. Good Vibrations. My Generation. Do you see the connection?
I see the connection.
Exactly. And that was right in the middle of this troubled time. How these troubled times affected you? I remember you told me that you don't care if this guy is Protestant or Catholic or three-head alien. What you really need to know if he can play a good bass guitar. That was your.
That's right.
Verbally.
That's absolutely correct. I remember.
Back to the 70s.
And still, absolutely. Right back to the 70s when I was. The troubles began in 1969 when I was 8 years of age. And, they finished in 1998. So for most of my young and adolescent and adult life, you know, there were army checkpoints and people were being murdered every day, and there were bombs going
And
off.
you've seen it with your eyes?
Absolutely,
Oof.
absolutely. I've seen it with my own eyes, and horrible. The thing about it is when something like that starts when you're so young. So I'm 8 when it starts.
Mhm.
It very quickly becomes normalized. So, you know, I would go to school and you would hear an explosion in the distance. I remember one day coming from school when I was
Just
11.
check. What city was that? Derry?
In Derry.
Derry.
I'm from Derry.
Yeah.
Derry, or London Derry, depending what you want to call it. So, and in fact, the troubles began in Derry. It actually sparked, the whole started in my hometown. So, but as a kid, you very, very quickly become immune to what's going on around. So, for instance, and this is quite a shocking story, but it's true. There was an incident in Derry in the early 1970s called Bloody Sunday.
Yes.
When a march,
yeah,
and it's been proved subsequently, 13 people were shot dead by the British Army. And essentially what happened was it put the troubles on steroids. I mean, it really, from that moment on, the lid was off Pandora's box. I mean, it was bad up to that point, but it really got awful after that moment. I remember what I was doing. I was playing football with some friends, kicking a ball against the wall, and you start to hear rumors that people have been shot, and, you know, kids being kids exaggerate everything, and 100 people have been shot, and blah 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 blah, and all that. You know, and it's not touching you emotionally at all. And I remember thinking, as we all did, wow, how many days off school will we get?
Kids.
That's kids, and that's absolutely what I was thinking. What great, we're going to get a day off school. Brutally, that's brutal. That's what kids think. And you know, and watching soldiers, you know, walking past your mother's front window, you know, 1450, heavily armed soldiers, armored cars, all of that stuff became normal. The soldiers used to come on search my school bus. So we'd be going to school, we'd have to pass through an army checkpoint. I used to feel sorry for the soldiers, because as the soldier would walk back down the bus, his flak jacket, his, you know, bulletproof jacket, would be collecting spittle from all the boys on the bus. And by the time he'd reached the end of the bus, his back was covered in spit, which I thought was disgusting. I mean, you know, I can only imagine that those. And I had nothing but sympathy for the British soldiers, really, because they were just kids who'd joined the army to get a job, and they were from poor backgrounds, the same as me. And I was always very detached from it, to be honest. Then, of course, once you move in, you become a teenager. I discovered music, and for me, it was a guitar. I mean, I was always a drummer. I was always a drummer in my head, always. I have a photograph of me at the age of 2 with a pair of drumsticks. But a drum kit is a very expensive item, you know, and we didn't have any money. But a cousin had a guitar. So I picked up this guitar and I started learning Paul Simon and Harry Chapin and James Taylor and that sort of. So I spent most of my teens locked away in my room learning covers of all these songs, and, you know, being terribly shy and not being able to look girls straight in the face, never mind talk to girls. You know, I just hid away. And you know, and teenage years pass, and I survived. A few people that I knew from my very own street. One guy that I was at school with didn't survive. You know, they were shot. They were shot. So yeah, no, I saw all that. It feels like a distant memory, and yet it's still very fresh. I can remember every detail.
But then you start playing drums professionally, and
Well,
was it kind of
no.
escape from reality, or was
No,
it like
no, it
normally?
wasn't. No, it wasn't. In fact, I didn't start playing drums professionally at all. And almost everything that has happened in my life has been incredibly random, right up to the point of meeting Boris, you know, where it was like sliding doors. These sliding doors moments that you hear. My life, I think everyone's life are a series of sliding doors, you know, how you two met, for instance. You know,
True.
if you turned a,
Yeah.
if you turned turned a different course, if you hadn't turned up to work that day, or you'd gone for a coffee in that direction instead of that direction, you wouldn't be sitting here now. So I think everyone's life is sliding doors. And so for me, I was walking home one night. I just left my girlfriend home. In those days, no one had any money for taxis, so you would walk 5 miles to her house, drop her home, and walk 5 miles back home. And on the way back, I recognized this guy from school, and he was in his father's car, and he'd run out of petrol. So we pushed this car to a petrol station, and we put like, $2 worth or £1 worth of petrol in the car, just enough to get it back to his place. He invited me in for some tea and toast. No biscuits, no funny stuff, just tea and toasted bread, blah, blah. And he took out a guitar, and I said, oh, wow, I'm a guitar player. Can I show you? And I play, The Boxer by Simon and Garfunkel. Mm-hmm. And he takes it back and starts playing this fantastic hammer-on blues stuff. Mm-hmm. And I suddenly realized, oh, I'm not really a guitar player. Mm-hmm. This guy's a guitar player. And we chatted, and he said, oh, well, I'm in a band. And we just fired the drummer because he wasn't any good. And I immediately just said, I'm not really a guitar player, I'm a drummer. and he said, well, do you want to have a go? And I said, sure. So I borrowed a drum kit. I did a little audition. And so these three guys who were at my school, we formed this little band. We played covers, blues, and blah, blah, blah. And then after a year and a half, just when we managed to buy the equipment, we all fell out and the band broke up. I went to college. I was at college for 3 years. And at the end of so this is the professional moment then. At the end of 3 years, I needed to stay in Dublin. I went to University College Dublin. So I needed to get a summer job to study for my final exams. And I went looking for bar work, which wasn't paying very much, collecting glasses until 2 a.m. And then I thought, hold on a minute, I can play drums. I have a drum kit now, and I can sing. Maybe I can get a function band, a wedding, playing at weddings, bar mitzvahs, whatever. No bar mitzvahs in Ireland, by the way, but you get the picture. And so I went and I bought, and again, this is how random it all is. I just decided, right, I should get a job in a band because I need to study for my exams. I went to the local newsagent. I bought the Evening Press in Dublin. And in those days, there were hundreds of advertisements for musicians in the back because Ireland's music industry was essentially show bands. They were called show bands, covers bands. Who played all the hits of the day in ballrooms. There were ballrooms everywhere in the country. We had, 2 TV channels and two radio stations. Yes. So entertainment was very light on the ground. So these show bands were the biggest thing. The first ad, professional drummer required, must have vocals. I picked up the phone. I lied about who I'd played. Who have you played with? Oh, I played with these guys and those guys and these guys. Oh, I lied. I played with one band, my friends from school. Okay, so listen, can you learn this song and that song? And yeah, sure. And okay, come for an audition next week. So I go for this audition the following week, expecting to play drums. And their big wagon had broken down. They didn't have a drum kit. He said, okay, look, we're looking for a singer as much as a drummer. Come to my house. And he played some scales on a piano. I sang some scales. I sang a few songs, and I got the job. And that was my first professional job. So I went from living on £40 a week as a student to making £30 a night as a drummer, which was a fortune for me in March 1983. It was an absolute fortune. I have no idea what I did with the money. After a year of making lots and lots of money, I had nothing to show for it at all.
But that was, Liam, that was all in Ireland. So you didn't move to
All in Ireland, absolutely. Yeah. No, all in Ireland. I spent 6 years in show bands. After a year and a half, I knew that I had to get out. But at this point, I'm in a money trap. I'm married. I need to save for a house, all that stuff. Lots of musicians become caught in what I describe as money traps. You're just making a wage. And so I should have left after a year and a half. I stayed for 6 years and in various show bands. But by the end of it, I had to leave. And the reason I left was the woman I was working for was about to enter the Eurovision Song Contest, which I've always hated. And I
really?
thought, I've always
I'm not
hated,
surprised for
I've
some
always,
reason, but that's okay.
always hated the Eurovision Song Contest. So she said, we're in the Eurovision Song Contest, or we're in the National Song Contest to go towards the Eurovision. And I kind of resigned on the spot. And so I very often say to people when they say, how do you get to do what you do? Very often it's really important to discover the things that you shouldn't be doing. And I'd been in these covers bands for way too long. I'd learned a trade. I'd learned how to play and all that stuff and listen. But I stayed way too long. And very often you should stop doing the thing that's making you unhappy. It doesn't mean that you will suddenly be revealed to the world. I then worked in an antique shop for almost 2 years, sanding tables just to stop that money trap of these endless covers gigs. And then very, very gradually I started to get freelance work. A day here, a day in the studio, a week contract, a month on tour with someone, but always with different people. And the man who introduced me to that world was another, in fact, he should be in that top 3 as well, Dave Early, a guy called Dave Early, who was Sade's drummer. He was a London session drummer. He married a girl in Belfast. I met him very early on. He was a true inspiration for me. And he's the guy who got me playing percussion. He came to me, he saw me play one night, and he said, Bradley, you do 2 things really well. You sing and you play drums. If you learn to play percussion, he said, if you learn 3 things, you'll never be out of work. And I said, what's 3 things? And he handed me a tape, how to play congas. He said, go on, learn that. Of course I didn't, because I'm lazy. It's like, have you learned Russian? No. Have you learned to play the congas? No. So 2 years later, he came back. He said, did you ever learn those congas? And I went, oh, not really. Well, you've got 2 weeks. He put me up for a gig where I had to play congas on TV 2 weeks from this day. And I went, I can't. He said, I'm not asking you to be a congero. I'm asking you to learn a conga part for 2 songs. Now go and do it. And I kind of need people like that to push me. I'm lazy, with a capital L for Liam, lazy. And so it took Dave Early to push me into percussion. And then I learned from watching him and watching other people. And from that moment on, I really started to develop my own style, my own way of playing things. And I started depping for him. What that means is if there was a gig that he was booked to play with Van Morrison and he needed someone to play with one of his other acts, I would be that guy. And he would tell them, oh, this guy's really good. And in fact, I wasn't. But he would tell them that I was really good. And because he would tell them I was really good, they thought I was really good, when in fact I was terrible. and that's quite a trick. That's quite a trick. And I do that myself now. If I need a depth for someone, I'll tell, oh no, this guy's amazing. And he might not be, but I'll tell them that he's amazing, because they have to believe that he's amazing. It's being on stage with any artist is all about confidence, and confidence is wafer thin, fragile. It's artistic confidence is very, very fragile. So if someone believes in you, it's great. And that brings me right back to Boris, because I've never been on stage with anyone who gives me such confidence. From day one, when we played the first track of Arkhangelsk, he was smiling. And, Boris has this fantastic smile. And when I always say to Boris that when Boris smiles, all Russia smiles back. Because in the West, there's this notion that Russians are quite surly, that they're very kind of nyet, that the most popular word in Russia is nyet. But in fact, when you're with Boris Borisovich, as you're walking through, an airport and there's a lady checking your passport, I always stand behind Boris. So she looks at the passport and then she looks up and smiles at Boris. And then I look at every time they smile at Boris. And then she looks at me and I go, I'm with him. I'm with him. And you see it all over Russia, from the tiniest little towns, Tver, and all the way to Vladivostok, to, you know, down to Kiev in Ukraine, and all the way up to Arkhangelsk. And you walk down the street with Boris. You walk into a bar. We walk into many, many bars, you can imagine.
Yep.
People, there's that instant, is it him? Wow, is it him? Big smile. And so my impression of the East is that it smiles all the time when I'm with Boris.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, coming back to your personal history, Van Morrison.
Yes.
How come?
So
How did you enter this band? Because you were playing with Van Morrison for quite years, right?
On and off. Yeah, I mean, I've never played for Van for more than a year or a year and a half, but you know, in one continuous time. So the most continuous time was between 97 and 99. I was continuously in the band. Variously, I've been in and out and in and out and in and out over the years, which, as it turns out, is a much better way to be, because people who stay for a long time eventually fall out with Van. I've never fallen out with Van, ever. You know, he uses me when he wants me, and then he'll use someone else. And again, it's that I'm very realistic about what the business is. People assume that when they're in a band, they're in a band. No, you're in the band for as long as the artist requires what it is that you do. If they get bored with what you do, they're going to use someone else. Now, if you know that to start with, you don't take it personally. You should never take it personally. It's a creative decision on their part. So how did I get into Van Morrison's band? Okay, so back to my friend Dave Early, the guy who said Learn Congas. He was playing with Van, and he couldn't, there were three other bands that he was also playing with, he couldn't work with. So I became the drummer for these three other bands. One was a guy called Andy White, who's a singer-songwriter. Another was a kind of a country covers thing. And most importantly, the third was a guy called Henry McCullough. Henry McCullough was the guitar player with Joe Cocker and the Grease Band. He was the guitar player in the original Wings. He played with, you know, played on the theme on the soundtrack of Jesus Christ Superstar. He's a legend. In my ignorance, I didn't know who he was. You know, I was just told there was a guy called Henry McCullough. Dave Early's recommended you to do this. Well, if I hadn't met Henry, when I met Van 2 years later, I would have burned at the stake. Meeting Henry is like a version of Van, because Henry doesn't say very much. He'll start to play. He communicates by telepathy, is the only way I can describe it. But he was very, very kind to me. So that was my real apprenticeship. I tell this story often. If I was ever to write an autobiography, this would be the title. I arrive at Henry's in a kitchen. Funnily enough, it's the same place I met Boris, now that I think about it. Oh my God. So there's a guy called Enda Walsh. He was building a studio called Amberville. I would meet Boris in Amberville in 2011. The first day I went to Amberville was the audition for Henry McCullough, 1990, 89, 90. And I arrive in, and of course, up to this point, I've only been a show band drummer. I've been a covers drummer. So I listened to the record. I copied what the other drummer does. I'd never actually just played. I'd never played as an artist. I copied other people. Okay. So I'm 30 at this stage. It's not like I'm a kid. I'm already a man. That's how useless I was. So I arrive at this audition, and I don't know anyone, and they're all setting up. I'm very, very nervous. And there's this guy, Henry McCullough. Luckily, I had no idea how famous he was. He's just this kind of guy in his 50s with long hair, looks like a bit of a hippie, you know, smokes a bit of weed, whatever. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy looks like a rock and roller. But I didn't know who he was. Really, I didn't know who he was. So I turned to him just before we begin, and I say, Mr. McCullough, do you have any records that I can copy? And he looked at me with this withering stare, and he said, and I quote, and this will be the title of my book if I ever write it. doesn't work like that, kid. Switches his amp on. It works like this. And he just started to play. He didn't say anything. He just kept looking up. And he was playing this groove. And he didn't say anything. And this went on for an eternity. I had never experienced anything like this before. But I suddenly, there's an expression in Ireland, slightly rude. It's called shit or get off the pot. Okay. So do something. Do something. If you're on a toilet, well then take a dump. Do something. And I remember thinking this, shit or get off the pot. I reached down into my stick bag. I lifted the sticks. And at that point, he looked away and kept playing. He didn't say anything for the next 2 hours. He just kept playing song after song after song. I reacted. I didn't take my eyes off him. I just reacted and reacted and reacted. And at the end of it, he went, okay, we start next week in Sligo. And I got the gig. And that was a sliding doors moment for me. That was one of those. And it's just sitting here now, I've only just realized that I essentially auditioned for Boris in the same place in 2011 in Amberville. In fact, Enda Walsh, who owns Amberville Studio, was digging the foundation of the studio the day I auditioned for Henry McCullough. And Boris Grebenshchikov walks into that same studio in April 2011. And that's how I met Boris.
Sounds like fate, huh?
Just very strange. I mean, all of these things, very strange. Deciding, I think I should get a job to do my final exams. First ad. Meeting my friend who'd run out of gas that night, run out of petrol that night. If he hadn't run out of petrol, I wouldn't have met him. I wouldn't have joined that band. Sliding doors, sliding doors, sliding doors, sliding doors. Amazing.
Back to Van Morrison.
Okay.
Did you become friends or like on
No. I don't. I'm not entirely sure that Van makes friends with people. I think he has people that he admires, and I think he has people that he has respect for. I'd like to think that, I've played on 6 or 7 of his albums at this stage, and he's come back. The most recent was in 2016, and I think you can gain his respect. You can gain his respect by doing a good job. But I don't think I've certainly not me. I don't think you can become friends with someone like that. No more than you can become friends with Bob Dylan or these kinds of people. I think Boris is an exception. I really would like to think that I am his friend. We've shared so many experiences at this stage. Boris is the exception to just about every rule there is. So
it's so interesting. Listen, I need to ask my wife. Listen. We are talking with Liam Bradley. He lives in Ireland, and he's a great percussionist. Correct. And I asked him about his life, and I asked him and he's coming back to Boris all the time. Did you notice that? Huh?
Yeah, because this is a great part of his life, I guess, right?
It's part.
It really is. It really is. And I very often think, and I've said it to many, many people, that all of the other people that I've played with, whether it's covers bands, show bands, Henry McCullough when I met Henry, Van Morrison, the Blue Nile, Mary Black, countless names.
Boyzone.
In a Boyzone, absolutely. Ronan Keating, yeah. All of these things.
Okay.
I'll return you to what I said originally about being a stylist. I love all of these types of music. I get as much of a kick out of playing with a click track behind a boy band as I would playing Rain Check or Moondance with Van Morrison. Really, I do. It's I'm an ensemble player in a great ensemble. And, it might be a boy band in an arena playing, popcorn music. But to be on that, to earn the right to be on that stage with a band that can play that music,
it's a chemistry.
You really have to be very good. You have to be on top of your game to do, because if 10,000 people are paying $100 a ticket to get in there, and it's a big shiny show, you don't want to be the guy who messes it up. So you have to, there's a level of professionalism that I enjoy. I enjoy being a super professional in a pop situation, but I also love being an organic musician with someone like Van or Boris or Paul Brady or Henry McCullough. And really what I'm trying to say is that all these other people gave me the skills to work with Boris, because Boris and Aquarium is a stylist's dream. Because, you know, if you work for Van Morrison, essentially it's rhythm and blues with a bit of folk, a little bit of jazz, a little bit of folk, but it's essentially it's a rhythm and blues band. You know, that's his oeuvre, is rhythm and blues and jazz and soul. Boris is all of those things. You know, there's a little bit of reggae, there's a little bit of jazz, there's a bit of really heavy rock in there. There's obviously like the finesse of the really quiet, delicate folk songs. There's a huge Eastern Russian element. There's an element of India and the deep East. There's Chinese music in there. You know, there's so much. Aquarium is a world music band. And Boris writes as a world music songwriter. Obviously, his themes are Russian, but stylistically, he's influenced by the world. And so to play in his band, and Aquarium is his band. He protests that it isn't, but it is his band. You need to be able to play all these different styles. And it's almost like the first 30 years of my career, we're preparing to play with Boris Grebenshchikov. How I met Boris is bizarre. It's bizarre how I met Boris. I was helping a friend of mine, cousin actually, to make a little album, a vanity album. And I was making plans and booking the band and booking a producer. And I was trying to persuade her to use this particular recording studio. And it was going to cost a lot of money. And it was a lot of money that she was never going to make back. I was trying to make that clear. You're going to spend all this money, and it's unlikely that you will make this money back. I need you to be absolutely sure about this. And so we made an appointment to go and see the studio. And the studio is 50 miles from where we both live, on a Monday morning. And she said, great, okay. And then on Sunday night, oh, I can't go. I have to do this. And I said, okay, let's go next Monday. And the next Monday, the same thing happened. I booked it and she backed out. And then the third Monday, the same thing happened. I booked it and she backed out. And on the fourth attempt, I said, okay, we've got to go there tomorrow. No excuses. We're going there tomorrow. On the way, I get a call from the owner, Enda, and he said, oh, listen, sorry, Liam, I should have said, can you and Francis be out of here before 10 o'clock because I have, quote, a big session coming in. I said, sure. We get there at 9. We have a cup of tea. We do a deal on the studio. We decide, let's get out of this guy's face because he has a big session coming in. And the big session was Boris, Sasha Titov, Boris Rubakin, Jerry Boys, who was producing, and Brian Finnegan. They arrived 15 minutes early. Now, if they'd arrived on time, I would never have met Boris. If Francis had decided to go any of the previous 3 Mondays, I would never have met Boris. If we'd left slightly earlier, a minute earlier, I would never have met Boris. I met Boris. And I mean, it was in the doorway. It was sliding doorways. Hello, goodbye. And I recognized Brian Finnegan, and Brian Finnegan recognized me. We had done a TV show once. I didn't really know who he was. I didn't know each other at all. I recognized him. I thought, oh, he's a trad guy. He's one of those trad guys. I think I did a TV show where he was a guest on the show, and I was in the house band. And he knew me. He knew that I was a drummer. And I think later that day, or maybe the next day, I get a call from Brian, who's gotten my phone number from the owner. He said, look, this Russian guy isn't happy with the drums that he recorded in London. Would you like, I told him that who you played, and what he'd actually said was, oh, that guy plays with Van Morrison. And of course, immediately Boris goes, he's Van Morrison's drummer. Well, no, I'm one of about 50 Van Morrison drummers. If you know, from the last 50 years, you know, there are many, many Van Morrison drummers. But, oh, he's Van Morrison's drummer. Wow, do you think he would play on my music? And Brian says, of course he will. So I come up, and again, almost like Henry, because I didn't know who Henry was. I wasn't nervous. I didn't know who this Russian guy was. I didn't know how important he was. I didn't know he was like the Russian Bob Dylan, which is actually not even close to describing what Boris is. Boris is more like, he's a combination of Van Morrison, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, and Christy Moore, who's a famous Irish trad guy, and Bob Marley. I think if you had those 5 people wrapped up, that's who Boris is. He's not just Bob Dylan. He's much more than that. So, but if I'd known who he was, I would have been nervous. He's just a guy. He's just a guy with a beard. And the studio, I'm very familiar with the studio. I'm very familiar with End. I've worked there many, many, many times. And so I'm totally at ease. And then at the end of the session, he reached down into his Gladstone bag to pay me with a big wad of cash. And he said, would you like to come to Russia maybe? And I said, yeah. And that was that. And that was that. It was that simple. No, we didn't actually get together. He asked me almost immediately to come, I think, to Rock on the Volga. And I couldn't do it because I was touring with someone else that summer. And the first available date was, I think, September, October of 2011. And we played in Crimea on a beach, a big festival. And so that was actually my first gig.
Of all the places that you visited with Aquarium, and obviously most, like majority of them is the concerts for Russian-speaking people, right?
Sure.
But it's all over the world, as far as
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So which place was more like welcome? How did you feel? Is it depends on the geography, on the country, or what it?
No, the audiences are, because they're Boris's audiences, they're always exceptionally friendly. Again, it's that thing, Boris smiles and all Russia smiles back. Boris smiles and all all Russian speaking people smile back. So whether it's the Royal Albert Hall, we played the Royal Albert Hall in 2014 to 8,000 people, or the Beacon Theater in New York, or I can't remember where we played in Chicago, or Vladivostok, or Goa in India, or I think Paris. We did a fantastic gig in Paris. They're always Boris's audiences. It's almost like the same audience will fly to every gig. And certainly I definitely see the same faces. I definitely see the same two, 3 faces. Sorry, I think the I'll just plug this phone in because the battery is starting to. Zoom calls.
Is it okay now?
I think Zoom calls really chew through a battery, don't they?
Just a little bit to the right, please.
I'll just plug the power in. There we go, just in case we. Can you still hear me?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know what? I found myself in kind of strange situation. As you know, I know Boris personally, right? We met a couple
of course.
Times, and well.
2 seconds. I can barely hear you. There we go. Hold on. Speak.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, but
I'm sorry. I think that's the good moment for me to leave you guys.
Okay.
You love him, please.
I love you, Liam, but I have a student waiting for me.
Oh, go. До свидания, всего доброго.
Всего доброго.
And please don't forget to ask him what he's reading right now. You're always my inspiration in reading.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah, that's true. I remember everything you've said about the books you read.
Okay, tell her right now.
Right.
Because I won't remember that anyway.
I'd have to think about that, to be honest. So I'm not really reading anything at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay. So
okay, if you have any ideas, just let me know, let him know, send him the titles or whatever.
I'll come up with something suitably pretentious.
She's crazy with reading. She's reading all the time.
I'm all into books, yeah, that's correct. So thank you so much, and see you, I hope, soon.
No,
Why not?
I will see you soon Anyway, so in other
Who's interested
thank you,
in
Jim. So in other words, and you know what, I found myself that if I'd met Boris, and if I do my kind of journalistic music critic kind of job, what should I ask him? And you know what I found myself? No, I don't have questions for him because I know his songs.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want him to repeat the same patterns all the time. He's doing his radio program, and that's fantastic. He's doing his interview, not very often, but he's doing that. But he's writing songs non-stop, and
No.
all answers are in his songs. So I don't have anything to ask him except for Bob, I love you. Something like that. And we really are. And do you understand that how important is Boris, how important part of Russian culture with capital C? I'm not sure because you know what, it's very, very Russian language based thing, concept, but still.
Okay, well, maybe in terms of the lyrics, I don't understand, but I asked Igor Timofeyev, who's the guitar player and saxophone player in the band, explained to me why Boris was so important. And he said back in Soviet times, even though, I mean, you know, the Soviet Union was in full swing, there was this one guy who seemed to be, even whilst he was living in the Soviet Union, was a kind of a free man. He was a free spirit.
Yep.
And Igor said that as a young boy, and Igor would have been very young at this stage, he found this to be amazing and perplexing and very, very profound, that this man could live within this system and yet kind of ignore the system and just still be himself within any system. And he said that's what's important to Boris. About Boris, and that Boris is one of the true free spirits. I have met lots of people who claim to be free spirits. Boris really is one. You know, when he had that terrible health problem 2-3 years ago, and he collapsed and he was in a coma for weeks, and we were over. I mean, he was literally going to die. I mean, I thought that's it. It's over. It really is over. And of course, when he comes out of it, it's the same. He expresses the same sentiment each time. Yes, it was very interesting. That's it. It was very interesting. And let's embrace today. And Boris, you know, he embraces life on a moment by moment basis. He doesn't particularly plan for the future. He doesn't care what happened yesterday. That's expressed in how quickly he turns around albums. He lavish all this time on an album, crafting it, making it great. You know, I've played on, you know, 4 different versions of a song, Steve. There have been 18 versions of one particular song. And he just keeps at it until he gets the one that he wants. But the moment it's done, he's already lost interest in that one, and he's moved on to the writing right now. This man lives in the moment like no other that I've ever met. And I think that's what's special about Boris. That's why people may not realize that that's why they love him, but that's actually at the core of what he is. He lives entirely in the moment. And all that poetry comes from that moment that he's in. And then he moves on to the next moment. There's no past, there's no future, there's the moment. And I'm sure there's some deep philosophical thing you could say about that, but I've seen it firsthand, and it's incredible. He cheered me. I mean, I had problems with my eyes a few years ago, and I took great solace from the fact that Boris has you know, gone through awful health issues over the years with his eyes and everything else, and yet there he is smiling at the front of the giving it, playing 4-hour gigs. I'm exhausted. He's 10 years older than me, and he's full of energy. And then he wants to go to the cocktail bar. I want to crawl into bed. And he went to the cocktail bar. And then he said, okay, I'll see you for breakfast. And he's up at 8 o'clock. Oh my God, you know, that's what's special about Boris. He lives in the moment. And his example, the example that he gives is, you know, fuck flags and nations and all this stuff. Just be yourself, because you're a human. We're all part of this great human circus. And Boris recognizes that it for what it is. And he embraces every experience, good and bad, positive and negative, in exactly the same way. It's mind-blowing, really.
From all Boris Grebenshchikov fans, I thank you, Liam, because for a person who actually doesn't speak Russian, you have such a great feeling, and the right feeling. That's absolutely right feeling. Listen, you know what? May I ask you a couple of, it's not personal question, but I hate this kind of questions addressed to musicians, but still, you're not politic, right? Absolutely. But recent years, and it starts with the Russian-Ukrainian clash and everything, recent years was kind of problematic. Trump, Putin, Brexit, blah, 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 blah. I hate it. But I'd like to ask your opinion on that. What do you think of these times?
I'll tell you what my opinion is, and it's a broad historical view.
Okay.
It's a very broad historical view.
And it's not accidentally I ask you, because you were a boy in Ireland during all these troubled times. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So my broad historical view is this, is that for millennia, you've always had rich, elite people at the top creaming off everything, and the vast majority of ordinary people underfoot, okay?
Yeah.
Now, in the 20th century, you have three major things. The First World War, the Russian Revolution, and the Second World War. Now, in the West, in America, in the United Kingdom, in France, and Great Britain, and all these Western liberal democracies, the elites, certainly after the First World War, having just, you know, slaughtered millions of their own people in this completely futile and fruitless war, they get the living shit scared out of them when they see what happens in Russia. So the example of Russia is when rich people take the piss for too long, and then you slaughter millions of people in a war, they come and they will shoot you and throw you down a mine shaft, which is what happened to your Tsar, okay? So in the West, they start to make concessions to ordinary people. So you get a little bit of education, some decent housing, and then the Second World War happens, and it happens all over again. And you're asking ordinary citizens to lay down their lives, and in the Soviet Union, same thing, 28 million plus people die, blah, blah, blah. In the UK, 1 million Americans and all that. And after World War II, the elites, if you like, I think in England, the Tory party, in America, the Democrats and whatever, they suddenly realize, oh shit, we better give these people something to keep them quiet. So after World War II, it's no coincidence that in the United Kingdom, we have the welfare state, free medicine and education. We've got decent housing. And I was the first generation to really benefit from that.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
Being born in 1961, I get free health care. I get free education up to university standard. I had, we had a nice, we were poor people, but we had a nice house. It was it owned by the state, but it was a nice house. No, that happened 70 years ago. And I think since the 1980s in particular, the elites, whether they be Russian elites or American elites or British elites or Panamanian elites, it doesn't really matter. The memory of those cataclysms is so far in the distance that they're now starting to take back all those things that ordinary people had. So now you have to pay to go to university in the United Kingdom. They sold off all the public houses after Margaret Thatcher. Unions, the power of unions were all dismantled. Same thing happened in America. As well as that, in America in particular, they sell this idea that the word socialism is synonymous with evil. because they would say socialism is communism. Well, I grew up in a social democratic state. You know, we had socialism after World War II, and that free education, free healthcare, blah, blah, blah. The net result of all that is that, you know, you have people like me who go to university, have careers, and we pay taxes. So I pay way more tax because I'm an educated person than I would if I was a bricklayer working on a building site. So social democracy really, really works, I think. But what's happened is the elites at the top have decided, okay, 70, 80 years have gone by. Let's start taking all this stuff back. The difference this time is that both the Republican Party in the United States and the Tory Party in England have now started to, they've figured out how to get ill-educated people to vote against their better interests. So poor people in America are voting for billionaires to give other billionaires tax cuts. In the United Kingdom, they're voting for rich landowners who run the Tory party and industrialists to pull us out of Europe so that the rich guys don't have to pay offshore tax. And in the meantime, all these industries, from cars to fisheries, will go through the floor. But they've managed to persuade all these people. And how they've persuaded them, and same I think goes for post-Soviet Russia, is the rise of nationalism. It's again the rise of nationalism. America for America, Brexit, you know, Britain, let's get Brexit done. Britain, and really what Brexit is about is the rise of English nationalism. It's the rise of English nationalism. So I think what you have at work with the Republican Party and the US is an American nativist nationalism. In the UK with Brexit, it's English nationalism. I think the same thing is happening in Germany and France and all over the world. But it's the rise of nationalism, and it's people forgetting that the last two great world wars were as a direct result of nationalism. Nationalism always ends badly. Excuse me. It's not COVID, I promise. I hope. So that's my long historical view that that's what's happened. Big war, give the poor people decent living, let 80 years go by, then start taking it all back.
I should ask you, how do you see the future, the nearest future? Well, we had new president back in the States, which is already good news.
Very, very, very good news. However, you have almost half the population believing that he stole the election. That's incredible. I don't understand how the likes of Fox News and all these right-wing channels are even allowed to exist. Surely you can sue people if they tell lies. You know, they tell lies all the time.
Yeah.
And surely you can sue people for that sort of stuff. I find it inexplicable. And so I think what the rich and the elites have figured out is you buy newspapers, you buy some TV channels, you buy some radio stations, and you just spew out. I think Goebbels would be embarrassed at the level of propaganda that's being spewed out by the right wing at the moment. I mean, I think he would be astonished.
Yeah.
And even in my own circle, who believe all these conspiracy theories about, you know, COVID and vaccines, and it's a right wing this, it's a Jewish that, it's a whatever. It's like, what is wrong with you people? Children, I think, at school should be taught the art of critical thinking, and not just, you know, dates and facts. Critical thinking. Ask questions. I've been asking questions since I was 7, you know, and I've never ever stopped, and hopefully I won't stop. It's why I believe the things I believe, and I don't believe most of the things I was taught. So I'm not optimistic for the near future. I mean, the next 5-6 years. There's a real chance that Trump, or a Trump-like, a more competent Trump, might emerge in the next 4 or 5 years. My God, the only thing that saved us from Trump was that he was such an idiot. Imagine if you had a really smart version of Trump. That would be catastrophic. But I'd like to think that the next generation, the younger generation coming up, if they think critically, then, you know, with the rise of Facebook and all this stuff, who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm optimistic in the long term. I'm pessimistic in the short term.
Right.
But I hold a mirror to all this, which is the BG, the big A mirror, which really says we're very privileged to live through such interesting times. If I look back, you know, as a child, describing what I described to you, living through bombings and shootings and murders and army checkpoints, it sounds awful, but it was entirely normal for me. So in many ways, my childhood and adolescence and early manhood were much worse than the life I live now and the life that most people live now. So you could put it, as Boris would say, and I do keep returning to Boris. There have always been good times. There have always been bad times. There's always been great politics. There's always been bad politics. You pick any year in the last 1,000 years, and you'll find something just as awful going on in that year as we're experiencing now.
True.
It's the human condition. What can I say?
You traveled both in Russia and Ukraine. How did you feel the difference now?
Initially, I saw no difference at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was pre-2014. I could see no difference at all. I mean, for me playing in Crimea.
And after 14?
After 14, yeah, you know, in terms of an audience's reaction to Boris and Aquarium, there's no difference.
Mm-hmm.
He is loved every bit as much in Ukraine as he is in Russia. I think there may have been a few issues with a few political types, not in Ukraine, but, you know, I think criticizing Boris for playing in Ukraine. And so that's nationalism. That's nationalists are dangerous people. You know, it's why I'm from an Irish nationalist background, but I'm not interested in Irish nationalism. Yeah. I'm a European. I'd much rather be part of the European continent. I'm not wrapping the Irish tricolor around me. Flags are bullshit. I don't belong to a flag. I don't belong to a country. I'm a musician. All my friends are musicians and artists. And I think Boris is the shining light of all that. This is how it could be. You know, just enjoy yourself, love, listen to music. I know that sounds very simplistic, but actually he's right. He's right. The thing that got me through all of those troubled years, though, you know, when the army was here and people were was music. I just pursued music. Now, if everyone with a gun pursued music instead of learning how to fucking shoot a gun, well, then maybe there wouldn't be any wars. You know, if old rich men can't find enough poor young men to die for them, well, then there wouldn't be any wars.
Liam, that's fantastic end of this conversation. It's fantastic. I couldn't imagine the better way to stop, because after that, there is nothing else could be said.
Right. Well,
I stop recording now, but please don't go away.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
This is my pleasure. I am going to have to leave in about 5 minutes because it's my nephew's birthday and we're doing a drive past. We can't see him. We can't meet him. Okay. The whole family's doing, it's his 18th
I'll just steal you for a couple of minutes.
Sure.